I'm going to call the Marathon County Public Safety Committee meeting to order Tuesday, August 11th, 2026 at 1:30. And first on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And I understand we don't have any public comment. Okay. Number 4, approval of the July 7th, 2026 Public Safety Committee minutes. Jennifer and Jason. Any discussion about the minutes or changes? All in favor of approving the minutes, say aye. Opposed? Okay, minutes are passed. Number 5, operational functions required by a state ordinance, statute, ordinance, resolution, or policy. 5A, discussion and possible action by public safety. 5A1, discussion regarding the 2027 annual budget development and policy recommendations from the committee, including review of mandatory and discretionary program document and discussion of rates and fees, including but not limited to discussion regarding A and B.
All right, I'll kick it off. Thank you, Madam Chair. We do have, as was alluded to, we have some fleet discussion, and there's a memo in your packet, as well as there was a specific question at your last meeting about jail fees, so there's a memo in the packet as well to talk about that. But before we dive in there, I just want to, again, ground everyone. This is the ongoing budget discussion at each of the standing committee meetings. And one of the things that you were tasked with, that the board tasked each of the standing committees with, was examining each of the nonprofits that are funded, that are underneath the the oversight authority of each of the standing committees. And you do have one nonprofit leader here today. Jane Graham Jennings is here from the women's community to talk about the funding that the women's community receives from the county and how they utilize that through the work that they do, consistent with the budget allocation each and every year that the county has provided to the women's community. And just for context, if you go to your 2026 adopted budget, which is available online, the nonprofit funding for the women's community is on page 153 of the 205-page document. You'll see that the contribution from Marathon County to the women's community has been consistent over the last several years. Referenced within the budget, it's $55,000. That's the, again, the allocation, the direct allocation, consistent with the contract for service that Marathon County has with the women's community. And you'll see on that page what those specific areas of that annual contract are that I execute following the budget adoption each and every year. So with that little bit of background, Jane can come on up and provide a little bit of an overview of the work, the important work that the women's community does, and kind of a snapshot looking forward, or not only looking back at this year, but looking forward to next year.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for taking just a couple minutes to hear about the important work that the women's community does for safety in our community. One of the things, everyone should have received a mailing of our annual report. We send that to all the elected officials in our community, so if you don't have one, I brought extras in case. But what we added to our annual report this year, for your reference, is the contract for services that we do with Marathon County. We pulled that out of our data. So on page 13 of our annual report is the specific deliverables that we contract with the county to provide for the $55,000 that we get, which includes meeting with the victim witness staff in supporting survivors of domestic violence, sexual assault, stalking and human trafficking, attending probation and parole review hearings for offenders of domestic abuse, request for sexting diversion program, which is something that we've learned that some departments are no longer referring sexting to the DA's office. They are actually just issuing municipal citations, which is something we're looking into because that's not getting education to the folks who need to understand why what they're doing is dangerous. But we're looking into that, so that number is pretty low because, again, the departments we just learned are referring for municipal citations. We provide sexual assault education prevention in the schools in partnership with law enforcement and the district attorney's office. And of course, with the sheriff's department, we provide ongoing support and services to victims of domestic abuse when there are calls made. And then we work in partnership with the Child Advocacy Center, providing the follow-up and ongoing support for non-offending family and children who utilize a Child Advocacy Center. So those are the things that we are contracted to do, that we provide. So $55,000 is what the county provides for us. I did some numbers, and for the projects that we are providing services, that covers about 16% of our total budget for the cost of those services. In total, it costs us about $348,802 to provide those services that we contract with the county. So you can see your return on investment is pretty significant. In addition, we use the county funding to leverage an additional $350,000 that come into the community. So we use the county funds as match support for our state grants from the Department of Children and Families, as well as our Federal Victim of Crime Act, which requires matching. So the county, your investment is pretty significant, leveraging an additional $350,000 in addition to the $348,000 it costs us to operate the program, which the funding is about 16% of that. So that's kind of everything that you provide. We work very closely with numerous partners in the community. We work closely with law enforcement, particularly around safety, of course, is our main issue. We are working with our law enforcement jurisdictions to do lethality assessment protocol screening. The Sheriff's Department has recently become part of that process, which is basically a questionnaire that when an officer responds or a deputy responds to a domestic violence incident, they provide the victim, they ask these 13 questions. This is a vetted and evidence-based process which can literally prevent homicides. When someone is screened for high lethality, they reach out directly to the women's community to connect that victim with an advocate as soon as possible. Research also tells us the more contact a victim has with advocacy agencies, the better their long-term health and safety is. So this is a critically important tool that we're utilizing within Marathon County. In fact, we just met with the Chief Hunt from Mountain Bay yesterday, who is looking into implementing that in their department as well. So this, again, is a tool that we use to prevent homicides in our community in domestic incidents. So those are all the things that we do in partnership with law enforcement and working to ensure to the best of our ability, safety for all the citizens of Marathon County. So that is all I have. I was told to make it short, so.
If anybody has any questions, anything you want to know more, I think you'll hear this from the other nonprofits as well. Jane alluded to the idea of leveraging the county funds for match. That is a very common challenge that a lot of our nonprofit partners have, is grants that they're applying for do require base match funds, and the county's allocation oftentimes fulfills that for a lot of the programs.
Thank you.
So again, oh, you're good, Jane.
Okay.
Just again I met with Jane, I met with all the nonprofit executive directors to talk about building the 2027 budget, and absent direction from the county board to the contrary. Again, I've said this before, my approach in building the budget is to try to do all of the same things we did last year with effectively less money. My plan to build a budget with respect to each of the nonprofits is similar to keep their funding flat. I have no doubt all of them would ask for and could use additional funds if those funds were available, but that's been the message to this point. So if you have any questions for me relative to the nonprofit funding, I'd be happy to take them. Otherwise, we can, I can keep going with additional discussion on the budget.
Any questions from the committee? I guess you're on.
All right. Well, with respect to fees, and that kind of kicks us off to some of the two next discussions, I want to give you a little bit of an update on what staff have been working on relative to fees. So again, the direction the county board provided at your last meeting through the allocation exercise, that allocation exercise was based on a 3% increase in the fees that we charge for our various programs. Fees are certainly not a majority of the budget, the county budget. You guys remember that from the pie chart from the Budget 101. But that said, they are one of the few areas where we do have direct control, and they are an important part of building the budget. So with that direction from the county board, we've circulated essentially Excel spreadsheets to all the departments, laying out what the current fees are, what the projected 2027 fee would be, and we've asked them to provide some important information. If there are areas where we are statutorily prohibited from increasing fees, we want to make sure we note that. If there are areas where a 3% increase is insufficient to cover our costs, that is, that it has the cost increases have exceeded that, we want them to note that. Similarly, we want to, if there's an area where our fees to deliver a service have actually gone down, we've asked department heads to note that. And then one other important piece is if we have a fee for a service that we believe an increase could ultimately lead to a reduction in service coming in and a reduction in revenue, we've asked them to highlight that for us. The idea being, in those scenarios, there are certain fees that exist for things where we're the only game in town. If you want a zoning permit, and hey, Lincoln County's got a cheaper zoning permit, but your land is located in Marathon County, you got to come to us for a zoning permit. But there are other services we offer where that's not the case. You can get a marriage license from any county. You can go camping at private providers, at other public campgrounds. We know at our solid waste department, if we were to increase tipping fees 25%, that would have a significant impact on the market, and it would reduce the tonnage coming in. So those are the things we're trying to get that information from department heads, because quite honestly, they're the best situated to get that information, working with their teams. But that's the work that we've been doing since our last committee meeting, trying to really dial in before we have our individual one-on-one meetings with each of the departments, what those fees look like. So with that, if anyone has any questions, please let us know. Otherwise, we'll dive right into items A and B on the agenda, because there were specific questions relative to these areas. One was the sheriff's office fleet needs and kind of a discussion of long-term strategy, and the second is jail stay fees. So there's a memo in your packet relative to the sheriff's office fleet, and I'll turn it over to Chris to talk through this. But again, the short explanation, Madam Vice Chair.
Thank you. I just have a question about fees, and if this is not the proper time to ask this question, we can move on. But my question is, with assessing court fees for no-shows and their court appearance, do they charge for that when there's a no-show? You think about all the people that have to come together. So.
Yeah, that's a great question. So we've talked about this at this committee. I think it was last term, this was a topic of discussion. And the idea that, to your point, there's a prosecutor, if there's a prosecutor in court, a defense attorney in court, the judge, court reporter, court clerk, and then there's one important person not present to accomplish work, the defendant. There is a lot of sunk costs that can go into that. The challenge, to your point about can you directly assess a fee, I would say in a roundabout way you can, and that is the judge's ability to hold a defendant accountable through, one, the issuance of a warrant if they don't have an excuse to not an explanation to not be there and it's not been approved by the court. But they can also forfeit bond. So again, just to recap for everybody, when you have a court case pending in any circuit court in the state, one of the first steps for the judges, and a very important decision, is whether or not to release an individual, and if you're going to release them from custody, if they're held in the jail pending the outcome of their criminal case, do you do so with monetary bail or a signature bond? So if in either instance, if I post monetary bail or if I sign a signature bond promising I'm going to show up and don't have to post cash, if I don't show up, the judge has the authority to forfeit that bond. And there's a process in place for that. Defendants, once the judge makes a determination that an individual isn't present and they issue a bench warrant, if they schedule a bond forfeiture hearing, that defendant nevertheless has the opportunity to show up and express the reason for their miss. And the court ultimately makes the decision on whether or not to forfeit bond. The short explanation is this board, goes back to the separation of powers. Think back to fun times in grade school and high school. That's a judicial determination. This body doesn't have, in my estimation, and keep me honest, Brian, this body doesn't have the opportunity to put in place an ordinance or some other policy action that would say the judge needs to do X when someone doesn't appear. The judges in the state of Wisconsin are elected. And once they're elected, they are vested by that office to make those determinations. No different than Kyle's in the back, District Attorney Mayo. You know, you might have this body, the county board might say, you know what, in case types X, we really expect the sheriff to do this and the DA to do this. And the answer is you don't get to tell them specifically what to do unless you have if it implicates the separation of powers doctrine. So that is an area where I'm not aware of any ability of the legislative body at the county board, to say if a defendant doesn't show, the judge has to order a bond forfeiture in the amount of X. Long and convoluted answer, but I hope it answers the question.
Thank you.
All right, I think I passed that quiz question. But I'll turn it over to Chris to talk about, and if anyone else has any additional questions, please don't hesitate to ask. Rolling stock has been, the funding of fleet within the sheriff's office. This has not been a struggle recently. It's been a struggle for a lot of years. And Chris lays out in the memo, and he laid out at your last meeting and in previous meetings with sheriff's office staff, that one of our challenges was we kept funding flat for a great many years, and we've put in place a plan to increase that funding based on an average of CPI. However, the important thing, like I candidly shared with you last meeting, the essence of any plan is follow through. And we didn't follow through on funding the plan. A big part of that was, we fund our capital needs in Marathon County through a capital rollover policy where revenues in excess of expenditures roll over into the general fund in the year following the audit and are utilized for capital. When we make strategic decisions to deplete the general fund, it alters that math problem. Because what rolls into the general fund and what exists above and beyond our working capital calculation goes down if you, for example, buy down the tax rate. And that's what we did. So that led to last year not having any money rolling in for purchasing squads. So in essence, we fell behind on the plan. So the long-term question, as Chris laid it out in the memo, is what is our revised plan? And I think I don't know that anyone's going to leave here today with that revised plan, but what we can tell you is that we'll we're going to look, and you'll see in the HR Finance and Property packet for tomorrow, there is funding allocated for rolling stock for the sheriff's office fleet this year. But with that background, I don't want to steal all of Chris's thunder. The memo is on page 70 of the packet, but again, it really outlines what is nothing new, but a need to make sure that we, in essence, stick to whatever plan we come up with. So take it away, Chris.
All right. Hard to follow that act. No, no, in all seriousness, the memo and the plan in the packet really reflect a continuation of the conversations we've been having at this committee with Sheriff's Office staff and at the HR Finance and Property committees. So, what you see on pages 70, 75 is an update on that discussion. And what I did is I asked Enterprise to produce a plan that could mitigate the lack of vehicles entering the leased fleet option for 2026. And what you see in the plan in the packet is at the very top, there are several vehicles where those leases would be identified for rolling or flipping into a new lease. And so those vehicles would be renewed in the program, and through the vehicle sale, you'd see some equity come in. The equity numbers are conservative, so don't take them as exact, but essentially any of the gains that you get from the sale of the vehicle would roll into the next lease payment to reduce that. And big picture, the more you do that into your overall lease program, the more that equity gain allows you to lower those lease payments and or keep up with CPI and just market and costs and the like. Further down, there are certain leases that are shown in gray. And those leases, because there's room in the mileage to do it before they would really start hitting the point where you'd want to roll them or flip them into a new lease, those leases will be extended because of that. There is room to do so. So that would allow them to stay status quo. There's a note down below on two transport vans, the Pacificas. Those are exceptionally high mileage vehicles. So they're at or soon going to be at a point where you'd want to sell them to maximize their value and then roll them into the fleet program as well. And then at the very bottom, you've got a bigger chunk of highlighted vehicles, 17 of them, which would move into the leased fleet program. And then you see sort of the rolling totals of the different chunks of the plan on the far right. What's below those yellow are just more of the owned vehicles, some of them higher mileage than others, some of them, the uses vary. So even sometimes you'll have a high mileage vehicle that doesn't necessarily need to be sold because it's something that just doesn't get much use. But again, every vehicle is slightly different. As Administrator Leonard noted, there is funding in the 2027 CIP proposed project list, which will go to HR Finance and Property tomorrow. That amount is $456,548, and that is incorporating the annual increase to the rolling stock funding per the policy, which this year was 4.132%. So that number is not too shabby, though in future years, that 4% will go down because it's a 5-year CPI look back, and right now there's an 8% still in that 5-year calculation, but next year that's going to drop off. So we'll have that gone, and then whatever, this year and the last 4. So I would anticipate that the annual increase per the policy will be below that 4% number. But the gap between the number that is close to existing in this year's fleet funding or rolling stock funding and the increase for 27, the gap between that number and what you see on the screen is $138,876. So the big question at this point is that we haven't identified a clear funding source for that, but it's important to me to show you this is a plan that attempts to capture the lack of vehicles entering this year and then would have vehicles going into 27. So it's kind of a 2 years in one plan with a strong likelihood that if this plan as it is shown was adopted and funded, that some of those acquisitions would happen in early 2028, just because the plan as it shows is a pretty aggressive timeline. But what we want to do with Enterprise 2 is stagger the arrival of these vehicles, because what we've seen in the past is when they all come in at once, then it creates a real bottleneck with the upfitting of the vehicles. And so, in a past batch, we waited 13 months to get those vehicles fully upfitted and into operations. So by staggering, you spread that out time-wise, which allows you a little more flexibility in the rolling or flipping or shuffling of cars operationally, but also relieves some of the pressure on the, the pipeline from enterprise to the upfitter to the sheriff's office. There are still questions, like this isn't a cure-all. It does address a lot of the things we have been discussing from 2026 and then looking ahead. But there remain some questions across the sheriff's office fleet for some of their other vehicles. But the approach that we're looking at on the screen, that extends the use of the fleet program, and then staff would also need to work on alternative strategies to complement the fleet program as we looked ahead and move forward. Because ultimately, fleet funding like this is, you sign contracts, so it's a recurring funding situation versus one-time money. Although one-time funding can help you get through a spot, you want to make sure that whatever you end up doing plan-wise is something that you can sustainably fund. So hence, there's no resolution in a packet to accompany this right now, because funding for fleet is not typically approved until November as part of the budget process. So a 2027 budget decision made, in this month really can't be implemented until November, December, when the funds are allocated through the budget, but then really in January when the funds are available. And sometimes companies will say, okay, we'll bill you in December, you can pay in January, no big deal, because we know you're good for it. But that is something we have to account for in the planning process, because, if there's an ordering deadline or some other sort of time-sensitive thing, that may be well and true for the industry or for enterprise, but for us, it matters that we get through our process. And then once we know what the funding is and what the plan is, then you can start to move forward. Nevertheless, we're still in that window where we're developing the budget with Administrator Leonard and departments, and then also in concert with you. And then even after Administrator Leonard presents his budget, there's still time for the county board and all the committees to talk about it and tweak it up until budget adoption. So there's no resolution identifying the funding at this point, but any further direction from this committee and or HR Finance and Property, which I'll touch on this as part of that overall CIP discussion tomorrow and potentially later in the month at their second meeting. Any other discussion here and looking ahead will help administration, sheriff's office, and myself, with next steps, but also the budget development for 27. So that's sort of a hop, skip, and a jump through what we have for you today, but certainly happy to answer any questions if you have them.
Go ahead, Jason.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A question I have, I was looking at this, how long do you guys take loans out for? Because I see we have a 2018 with $17,000 on it for a 2027 payment total on the vehicles that we own. The ones that are highlighted to be changed over.
Oh, the leases?
No, it says owned.
Oh, owned. So sorry, what was the
If you look at
question?
the far side where it says 27, or is that just, you got on the far right, are those payments that we're still making?
The owned vehicles we're not making payments on.
Okay, none of those, because there has a dollar sign on the end of them.
Right, that would be if we were to flip those in. There's no current payment, as you see kind of towards the right there.
Okay.
And then flipping them into new vehicles would then create that 2027 payment. And then what the 2027 months in service is showing is that stagger I referenced. So, presumably according to this plan, that top vehicle would get flipped and arrive in January. So in 27, it would have 12 months in service. And then you scroll down towards the bottom, and the last one would effectively be arriving in December or November, so it would have 1 month in service. So staggering makes those vehicles available, sooner, because you're trying to get around the pipeline of upfitting and whatnot.
Okay, and then, with the lease program, are we using the county's ability to get vehicles at a cheaper rate?
100%.
Is that how we're getting some money back from when they're traded in?
In a
Because usually in a
nutshell,
lease, you lose everything once you trade it in, that's what.
in a nutshell, you've described how the program should work. You use the county's ability to purchase at a different price. You then sell it at that point where you've maximized your use and the resale value. And ultimately, what you end up doing is you cutting your operational costs of the vehicle, or your mileage costs, upwards of, it can get up to like 25%. So that's how that works. And so when you hit that point of flipping or rolling that vehicle, you're really trying to do it at exactly the right time so you don't lose that resale equity.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from the committee? Go ahead, Joel.
Thank you. I know that we talked about this at an earlier public safety meeting, and we talked about outfitting the squad cars. And currently, we have to go down to Portage to have them outfitted. The marked
Currently,
cars.
there's not very many vendors in the state that do it. I think there's one coming up potentially in the Milwaukee area. Then Belco is the primary vendor we go through now.
And where are they?
Actually, don't, Columbus.
Yeah, okay, that's the way I understood it the first time. Is there a way that we could work locally with, say, somebody like Sound World and find somebody that could train or be trained into outfitting these squad cars, these patrol cars? I mean, it's something to think about.
Indeed.
I knew that they did it when I lived in.
It's a great idea, and to be frank, Sheriff Bill can speak more on the details, but the idea that you're kind of alluding to, we did touch on discussing even potentially working with others in our area, but I'll let the sheriff kind of expand upon it.
And I'm going to lean on Administrator Leonard for a little bit of help here as well. Something that we're exploring is using the state's innovation grant in order to partner with our municipal partners, so the City of Wausau, the Mountain Bay Police Department, the Cronin-Water Police Department, and join together to employ a person or persons who will do that upfitting for us. And then what we would do is when they're not doing our cars, because if we do 10 cars a year, Wausau does 5, Mountain Bay does 2, and Cronin-Water does 1, that still leaves you plenty of capacity to upfit additional cars. What you would do then, and I've spoken with sheriffs in the region to see if there would be an interest, and there is, you could extend that out to them and they would actually pay you in order to do that work on their cars. One of the sheriffs I spoke with said that the benefit of that is anytime that something's wrong with their car, they either have to go to Columbus or Columbus has to come to them. So we see an opportunity there, but it requires us to write a grant and then continue to work on those conversations and communication with our municipal partners.
Thank you. Go ahead, Joel.
I had a follow-up. And so getting a squad car outfitted is one thing. Do we have to pay for the cost of on a trade-in on a vehicle when we're returning it to Enterprise, for example? We have to outfit it, and at what cost?
We take a lot of the local insignia stickers and things like that off, but yeah, there is I don't even know what you would call the de-upfitting.
You decommission the car.
Decommissioning of the vehicle.
Yeah, and there's a cost associated with that.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure, I'd have to double check on the lease, but even these lease payments reflect the upfitting cost embedded in it.
Do we have an annual breakdown of what that cost is annually?
Well, per vehicle, the upfitting is around $10,000.
10,000. And how many vehicles per year?
It totally is up to, it varies. 6 to 10, depending on available funding.
Okay, well, it's a starting point. Thank you.
I could add one thing to the sheriff's point, and I think everyone knows that we've been talking about this. We just had a meeting with, I participated with other municipal administrators and staff. I think there's an opportunity. We do have to write the grant. The benefit of that innovation grant program, again, is through the process as it's outlined, is you can leverage state dollars. So we take our cost to deliver a service, the other partners' cost to deliver a service. We consolidate the delivery of that service, in this case, the upfitting of squads. And a portion of that total cost, if you're awarded the grant, the state will pay for a defined period of time. So I think there's an opportunity here. It would just be, we need to essentially build a business plan to take on a new line of work. It's not unheard of for municipalities to do this. My understanding is quite a number of years ago, the city of Wausau used to have their DPW, I believe, would be involved in a fair amount of the upfitting of their squads. But it is, I think, to your underlying point, some highly specialized work. So we need to look at that.
Go ahead, Joe.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, it's kind of important to me because when I lived in Manatee County, Florida, a carpenter friend of mine had got completely out of carpentry, and he was very talented he rigged up the local sheriff's and police department cars, and he was very good at it. So my point was, we have McDevco, for example. We have Sound World. He worked for a sound company. I don't know if it was Sound World down there, whatever it was, but that's what he did. That was his job, his full-time job, outfitting, rigging up police cars, squad patrol cars. So is there something available besides state grant money to make this happen that we couldn't approach private business?
That's an interesting thought about approaching private business, but you brought up McDevco, and we've reached out to them to help essentially try to build the business plan of what this would look like, because they do a lot of work with small businesses to really understand the true cost. So I think we're thinking along the same lines. I say this feels like every day. One of the biggest challenges we have for the county, but I think every local government has it and every business is having it right now. There are simply not enough really good, really talented people available in the workforce. We're all fighting for a very small population of people, which at the end of the day, what that means is it costs more. But I think, to be very candid, one of the things we're trying to do, and that we will try to do when we build this business plan, it's great to leverage the state grant money, but this has to make sense long-term. It doesn't make sense for us to build a whole new program and a new business, get good at upfitting squads for 3 years, because that's how long the state will pay, 3 or 4 years. And then when we get to the end of the line, it costs us a lot more than it would if we went to Belco and then we have to decommission that whole program. So we're trying to make sure we're going to be intelligent with, this is the right direction we need to go long-term, but great ideas.
Deb?
Thank you. Is there any chance that we can do more work with NTC and the departments, because they have so many different facets to their educational system?
You guys are doing great, like making Chad and I feel really good. We reached out to NTC in connection with the reach out to McDevco to see if there was alignment with their automotive programs. And short answer is they didn't see a lot of direct alignment for them to deliver the service, but rather to, I think, long-term, make sure that there's a good workforce pipeline. I think we're in a good spot with them, but.
I might beat them to the punch on this one.
Yeah.
Watea is another group that we have locally that does a lot of work with young people that are getting into the automotive and mechanic trades. And I've already started a conversation with them about coming to the table with us as we design this and build it to see if there's a place for them as well. So we're trying to touch each one of those to make sure that we've got the right people with us.
Any more questions from the committee? I have one. Actually, I was talking to someone who retired from the sheriff's department a long time ago. He was hired by Sheriff Giannoli. I don't know how many people in this room remember him. I do. Anyway, he said that they had leased cars back then, but the gear, the belts that were damaging some of the interior, and the lease company was actually charging them for every hole that was put in the car for an antenna and any damage from the belts. And I know that our deputies really haul around a lot of stuff on their belts now. Is Enterprise going to jeopardize our program by overcharging for any kind of wear damage like that?
No, I think the easiest way to answer your question is that the condition of each individual vehicle is going to affect the resale. So there's not penalties along the way per se, but if we maintain the vehicle in good shape, keep it out of the hail and things like that, then you're going to not damage your potential resale value. And so if if you're able to do that, then you can maximize it. There is, I mean, wear and tear to your point, but there's no specific wear and tear penalty. Like maybe if you lease the car at the airport or something like that. I've heard some stories that sound just like that. But yeah, so nothing that I know of.
Okay, thank you. Any more, go ahead, John.
Thank you. I just wanted to interject in the discussion on rolling stock, which is an important part of our capital improvement program. We currently take 30% of the KIP and we dedicate it to IT. And we've got a significant costs associated with rolling stocks in parks, forestry, highway, and in the sheriff's department. And I think we need to look at ways to do it. Enterprise is currently a preferred provider, I think through Wisconsin Counties Association, or is it through NACO? So we do realize some cost savings associated with that relationship. But I think ultimately we have to talk about what do we need? How do we acquire it, and how many of them do we need? And I think that's something that over the next year, we really need to look at, whether it's the fleet or some of the other vehicles in the other departments. But we have more and more pressure on our capital budget it's difficult to fund all the programs and the priorities without bonding. So I think the board will need to look at, how many do we need, what do we need, and how many of them do we need going forward. And I think that's an important discussion over the next year. I think what Chris has put forward, it lets us limp through the next calendar year, but we do have to, on a long-term basis, look at this item.
Thanks, John. Any more questions? Go ahead, Tim.
So how many miles do we put on average, say, an average squad car in a year, on average?
That too is going to vary depending on where the patrol is at. So some vehicles are going to put on miles a lot quicker because they're further out. But the sheriff's office staff will, they can mitigate that by shuffling the cars around. So like if you're starting to really see the mileage pick up, you can swap it with a lower mileage patrol so that then you kind of balance it out in the end. But some of those cars like the transport vans, they can be upwards of 50,000 miles in a year, which is not a small amount of miles. But yeah, they do track it. There's reporting, so we can kind of keep that up to date and see that so that we can manage those miles, because it really is tied a bit to the lease, but also back to that resale value. You want to make sure that that projected use of that vehicle is not going to push you over a line where you're going to start losing money on the other end.
Okay, any more questions? All right, thanks, Chris. So we can move on to 5A1B, jail fees.
Sure, Chad will take this away. There's again a memo in your packet on page 76 is where that starts. This was a topic of, there was a question about what do our current jail stay fees and what do our revenue collections look like? And this is not going to be a surprise to anyone in the room, I don't think, but turns out that what we charge, what we bill the inmates for their stays in the jail, we don't collect dollar for dollar. Again, I know earth-shattering revelation, but thank you, Chad, for putting together the memo, and turn it over to Chad. And then if you guys have any questions, please feel free to jump in. I will have something before we wrap up, but go ahead.
Sure. The memo really outlines a lot of how our fees are structured in the jail. I know that some questions have come up about the memo and specifically about percentages and so forth. So one thing I want to clear up on it is you look on the second page in the second paragraph, we spell out this $303,606.06 of revenue that we realized in 2025 in the jail. That is not all related just to first day fees as well as the daily pay for stay fees. That is representative of all of the fees that we collect in the jail. So if we have an inmate that has special medical needs, maybe some prescription needs, maybe they have damaged property and we need to collect restitution, it is all encompassing. When you strip out of that $303,000, just the fees that are related to the pay for stay and the first day fees, that number is a lot smaller because not every inmate that comes into the jail is assessed those fees. When it comes to the first day fee, that is typically a sentenced inmate. And so people who come in on probation holds or somebody who's here pre-sentence, and if you remember from some of our other presentations, the makeup of the jail is largely about 10% of the folks we have at any given time are sentenced. Everyone else is pre-sentence. So not a lot of the folks that are coming to be with us are going to pay that first day fee. So that means that what we are collecting in the big scheme of things for fees is a very small sum of money. The current first day fee is $30. The daily pay for stay fee is $20. And when you're working with a population like we have with our inmate population, many of them are indigent, many of them have mental health needs, substance abuse needs, and employment can sometimes be a challenge. So the ability to collect from these individuals can be very challenging. Years ago, I want to say to me it's years ago, 2013, 2011, 2012, in that area, we used to actually work with a collections company to come and do this work for us. But what we realized at the time was they were in essence doing exactly what we could do, which is make an effort to collect the fees by sending that person to the Wisconsin Tax Intercept Program, TRIP, in order to, if they ever file a state income tax return, we can get a portion of that. If an inmate comes back into our custody and they come in with money and they want to put it on their commissary account, we could take a percentage of that in order to help satisfy some of the debt that they have. But all in all, we really don't collect a lot because it's a very hard population to collect from. So the moral of the story, and I believe Supervisor Handelsky, I think you might have asked the question in the last budget when we were talking about fees. And this is that same group of fees. When I didn't have numbers for you, these are those numbers. And this is why even if you increase, let's say we increased this fee, our ability to collect isn't going to increase. We're not going to get more money from it just because it is just this population. It's just going to make that debt number look a lot bigger.
Yeah, if I could add, it really is, you would see it on the budget, you wouldn't see it in your actuals, to Chad's point. The only other thing I'll add is later in your agenda, you're going to be talking about amending a portion of the ordinances. You did raise these fees in connection with a recent budget. You did it through that appendix, if you may recall that, we looked through Appendix A and it has all the fees listed. This is one, or I should say these are two. The first day fee and subsequent day fees. You talked about it and we did increase those fees. There is a specific reference to the old fee in the current ordinance. So it's something we got to clean up. We recently got the new fees introduced into the jail software they use to essentially invoice inmates. But again, in Section 5, I believe it's Section 5.11, I am going to be reviewing that and bring forward a proposed amendment beyond what's in your agenda today relative to the chief deputy section. But specifically as it relates to the fees, because of what I think is a real improvement in our budget process that we have that schedule of fees, I'm going to go through every one of our ordinances and I'm going to take out wherever there's a fee, I'm going to insert something that says see fee schedule or as set forth in the fee schedule, because we have a number of places where we just set ourselves up for an oversight just like this. And I own that. But I want to make sure we keep that fee schedule at the forefront, and that's where amendments are made. But I just wanted to reference that section. So be on the lookout. That'll be a future meeting. I hope to have that done by next month to roll that into some discussion, but it's not unique to Chapter 5. I found one in Chapter 12 as well. Our alarm fees are laid out specifically in there, so you'll see a lot more generic language in your ordinances, which I ultimately think serves the county better.
You have something, John?
I do on the budget, not on this issue.
Okay. Any questions for the sheriff from the committee? Go ahead, Deb.
Page 33, oh, thanks. Page 33, and this is on the sheriff's department as well. there is a section of not mandated items. Just let me get there. Okay, under the patrol, there's the animal investigation unit, the drone unit, commercial motor vehicle enforcement, recreation, and auxiliary. So there's like 5 of them in there, 5 or 6 that are not mandated. Well, then you go down further, the bomb team, K-9 unit. Is there any way to get grants to cover those expenses? Because I know we definitely pay enough, you know.
Yeah, I think you just approved, as part of your last county board meeting, we got some Wisconsin Emergency Management grants that the board approved accepting grant funds for that exact reason. I think, were those bomb squad grants, or were the bomb squad? Dive?
Yeah, night vision.
Bomb and dive. So the sheriff's office does a good job of applying for grants to offset some of the costs of these special teams. To your point, not all of them are mandated. They are a level of service that I think certainly is a good thing for the community. But to your point, that none of it is without cost, and some of it is expensive. I would say all of it is expensive. It's just a question of degree. But anything else you want to add? But you guys, the sheriff's office does a good job of applying for grants as often as possible.
No, we're pretty fortunate. Not many counties have the ability to do that. We are actually part of a group called ALERT, and ALERT is the Aligned Law Enforcement Response Team. Because we are an alert agency, I can tell you our partners, our neighbors are not. We get access to those grants when they don't. And that's what helps make sure that we can pay for equipment and tools and things like that when other counties likely have to levy for it or find another way to provide those resources. So that's the benefit of having the status that we have. And it goes to really, quite frankly, the expertise that we have within our office to provide that high level of service.
Any more questions? Jim?
I know they cut out the programs for the work release. Is there any conversation about maybe bringing that back for the lower crimes, to bring back a work release program?
Yeah, so the program that you're talking about is the Huber program. And that again goes to the type of population we have. That is only available for sentenced inmates. And when I say we have 10% of our inmate population who is in our jail, that also includes on electronic monitor. So of that, let's say 28 people, maybe 10 or 15 are actually in the jail. And if they're not safe enough to put out on electronic monitor, they're certainly not safe enough to put out on Huber. So that's why the folks that we can put out in order to save cost, and when you're on electronic monitor, you pay for that. We actually collect revenue for folks that are on monitor. Those are the people who are working. Those are the people that have an address. They have a phone. They have a way for us to communicate. So that's why they get that extra service. And that's why we really went away from the Huber release program, because we just don't have the population to support it.
If I could add one thing, I mean, Huber, just to say what Chad said a little differently, Huber is more expensive to run than electronic monitor. And to the sheriff's point, if someone is a good enough risk to let them leave every day to go to work and to come back, why wouldn't we put them out on electronic monitor that's less expensive, less costly from a staff standpoint, and less risk? I mean, because you're not having that person go out in the community and then perhaps bring something into the jail that they shouldn't. So we're not unique in the fact that we transitioned away from Huber, but again, the electronic monitor program is available for all those people that you just talked about that work release. If they have a job and they're a sentenced inmate and they otherwise sufficiently qualify, they should get the monitor.
Joel?
Yeah, since Deb brought it up, I didn't look at that closely, but I see there is a non-mandated drone unit, and this is for Chad. Do we have drone pilots?
We do.
And how many do we have?
I'm going to look to, any of you guys know, maybe 3 or 4?
I think it's more like 6 probably.
Okay.
Are they all Part 107 certified? And that's the extent of their,
Yes.
yeah, okay. The reason I bring it up is because there seems to be a lot of missing dogs. People go missing. Are these drones being effective in finding, do you get calls for drone usage quite often, or?
Yes, that's one of our most common callouts when there's a person missing. Fortunately, other resources find them first when we're about halfway there, but we do have some success stories, and that's one of the primary missions they train for.
What's the average cost of a drone
Oh, boy.
for the department?
It really runs the gamut, and it's come down in the past 5 to 6 years, but
So
I
what
would
would the
say,
individual cost for running a drone unit, as part of a branch off of the department, sheriff's department? What is that costing us? And is it a good investment?
I would say recent drones probably cost in the range that for our purposes that help and have the infrared cameras and stuff like that are in that $1,500 to $3,500 range. We don't buy one every year. They last several years when we buy one. So I don't have the numbers for what that makes it annually, but we're able to utilize it a lot because not only do they go out on drone-specific missions, but they also support all of our other special teams. If SWAT has a call out and it's safer for them to approach with a drone first to see what's happening, they'll do that.
I'm in favor of it because I'm a recreational flyer under the exception. So I'm just trying to figure out what the cost of operating this drone unit.
But the one thing I would like to add, though, one thing that people probably don't think of when they think of our drones is they are used extensively for evidence collection and for mapping scenes. So if we have a fatal crash out, it's really nice to be able to put a drone up and be able to see that entire intersection or that entire stretch of highway, because it's one thing to take pictures at ground level, it's a whole nother thing to see it from an elevated position. So I know our prosecutor's office, I believe DA Mayo is here. He can probably attest to that and the value of having drones at these different events.
That's very interesting. Any more questions for the sheriff?
But we don't have a cost breakdown on that. A rough.
Not in front of us, but to the captain's point, I think that we could go back, look at the equipment that we have. Obviously, some of it's a little older, some of it's newer, and then I believe they train quarterly. I don't remember how often that team trains, but they train because they have to keep proficient with their license and so forth. So there are costs involved, but we could certainly sit down and break that down a little bit.
Thank you.
Well, maybe we can put it on the next agenda if you guys have time. Okay, are any more questions? Don?
Relative to the budget, I just wanted to follow up on the discussion at the last meeting as well as the bucket process relative to mobile crisis services. And again, this is something that came out of the Wausau Policing Task Force and has the support of Sheriff Billup and Police Chief Barnes in terms of expanding mobile crisis services beyond the crisis assessment response team, which currently operates 8 to 5, Monday through Friday, and basically having somebody available to work with law enforcement when they deal with mental health issues in the field. And I think it's an important issue, and I just encourage the committee to continue to look at that through the budget development, and hopefully we can find funding for the expansion of it. Jake is here and the sheriff are here. I know that they are working on efforts to try to define what those costs will be and look at alternative costing strategies, but I think it's something that's long overdue.
Thank you, John. Anyone else? Okay, you don't have anything either? Okay, we're going to move on to 5A2, update on and potential consideration of new position requests and reclassifications in connection with the development of the 2027 annual budget. Take it away, Lance.
Thank you. So this is on page 81 of your packet. there's a memo in there. Just again to lay the stage here a little bit, your ordinances require any new positions or reclassifications that are going to be adopted into the budget to go through an initial review that's a request initiated by a department head. I then review them along with, in consultation with our HR director, Molly Edzik. We work with Sam to do some costing work, and if it's a position, a new position or a reclassification that we support, we bring it forward to a standing committee. If the standing committee supports it, it goes forward to HR Finance, and if HR Finance supports it, it gets put into the budget, which you can always at the last minute pull it out of the budget if you want. But that's the background. I want to tell you that your department heads have done exceedingly well. The last several years, the message has really been work within the means you have, that is within your existing budgets relative to new positions and reclasses. And that is largely what is before you. So I'll go through these. I won't go through every one in detail, but just to make a couple of points to clear up some things. But the district attorney's office, this is a good deal. Ultimately, the plan that we came up with, working with DA Mayo that our teams came up with, they have a restitution specialist that is 100% county funded within that office. They have a significant need relative to victim witness work. You may recall that previously ARPA funds were used to support a position. When those ARPA funds ran out, that position went away. So come up with a plan to take the 1.0 fully funded restitution specialist position, abolish that and create a 1.0 victim witness specialist and a 0.5 administrative specialist. So 1.0 county funded, now you have 1.5 funded, and the reason is we get state reimbursement through Chapter 950, which is the victim witness statutes, for that victim witness position. And the state has already, we've had that position on the books with the state because we had that American Rescue Plan Act position. So again, a really good innovative approach. It's indicative of what all of our department heads are trying to do, align funding streams with the work, or I should say align the work we do with the funding streams. It's going to cause the DA's office to have to realign some work that the restitution specialist was doing. Part of it will be done by that administrative specialist, but also assigned out to other paraprofessional staff, but really allows for that more dedicated victim witness position. Sheriff's office, this position largely speaks for itself, but it's abolishing a senior admin position and creating a corrections officer position. You have heard the sheriff and myself and Lucas talk about the challenges within the correctional facility and staffing. This is consistent with that, really moving toward having a position available to do all of the things they need to do in the jail. Clerk of courts, this is a reclass, moving an administrative assistant to an administrative specialist. The only thing I'd add here is this is really a function of we defunded or froze a position previously, and that required Kelly and her team to assign work to existing staff, remaining staff. One of the things that with the position that we've defunded was the scheduling for the family court commissioner. They've tried it, they've made it work, but reclassing this position and having some of those duties go back to the administrative specialist as opposed to simply being handled by everyone, it makes sense. I want to give Kelly and her team a lot of credit for trying to make it work again. And we're still not going to refund that previously defunded position. So while there's a little bit of fiscal impact here, it is quite minimal and it's going to be covered within the existing clerk of courts budget. So I support that change as well. Medical examiner office, abolish the deputy chief medical examiner position, which is a physician position, and create a senior administrative assistant position. So We had a challenge with operating that office with taking on all of the forensic pathology work that we've talked about a number of times. Case volumes really drive the work. I mean, we are essentially operating in a lot of respects a business. And we just did not have the case volumes to support a second physician position. So when we were building the 2027 budget, we were going to be moving away from that. We had that deputy chief position vacate yet this year. So as part of the budget building, we're working to align again the processes we have. Jess and Dr. Leah are working to align those processes to really make Dr. Leah as efficient as possible. Her time is to be spent performing autopsies if at all possible. So to do that, we want to make sure there's enough administrative support. So this is a abolishment of the physician position, that deputy chief position, and creation of a senior administrative position. The fiscal impact, you'll see, substantially positive in terms of less expense. I just want to be clear about the process of costing that. It is our practice when we cost positions, if the position is currently filled, our standard practice is to use the incumbent, because we know that position, the person is in the role, we know what they're currently being paid, what the next year they're going to be paid based on the projected pay increases, at least generally. When it's a vacant position, our process is to cost at midpoint. And the reason to do that is midpoint and family benefits. The reason to do that is it's a conservative approach. If a position is vacant and we go out to recruit and a person is the best qualified candidate and they have 15 years of experience in a role, first of all, we're all very happy when we have that happen. Someone's got a lot of experience. We bring them in. It is not reasonable that they're going to start at the entry level point. So to make sure that our budget, to mitigate risk that we're going to have budget challenges, we cost at the midpoint and we cost at family insurance, which is more expensive. So just to clarify, that's the estimates that were in there, but suffice to say, even at the midpoint, or excuse me, at the entry point, this would be a substantial cost savings. So those are all of the new positions and the reclassifications for the justice system involved departments. Again, the next step, should you support these moving forward, would be to make a motion to support them being into the proposed budget and move it forward to HR Finance and Property, which is meeting tomorrow. This is already on their agenda. That is consistent with the action. Health and Human Services met last week and considered the new positions and reclasses that were underneath their peer review. So we do that with every standing committee. HR Finance gets all of them. So I think I've covered everything I wanted to, Madam Chair, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions from the committee? Go ahead, Deb.
Thank you. I just have one quick question. At what point of employment do people get benefits? Like your 0.5 don't get insurance or paid holidays or anything, do they? I just don't know where that is.
I can look. I want to say that's I will get back to you. I don't want to misspeak.
Thank you.
Can I clarify, you're talking health insurance, but also like WRS? Do you want Wisconsin Retirement System? Okay, we can get you that.
Any more questions? Go ahead, Ann.
Thank you, Chair Mask. Lance, could you just dig into the pathology volume going down on the Forensic Science Center? I'm curious if that's because some of the other counties or organizations that had contracted or said they would contract didn't, and then if, why did that happen? And then what does that mean for our cash flow? Are we on track for the original projections, or are we in jeopardy of, having a long-term issue with subsidizing that differently?
Great questions. if I miss any, let me know, and Jess, you can also feel free to correct me, keep me honest here. I wouldn't say our volumes went down, but to your point, the projections that we had, Jess and Dr. Lee have worked well to try to bring counties on. Candidly, that has been a bit slower than we would have hoped, at least initially. I do want to be upfront with you. One of the parts of our business plan was kind of the cushion we had with bringing on 2 physicians was we really had the UP of Michigan was not fundamentally considered in our business plan for revenue. We were counting on them helping on the business side, but in the time from when that business plan was initially put together, which is quite a number of years ago now, to present, the UP changed in terms of how a number of their officers got forensic pathology services. So the short answer is we were monitoring our revenues from our number of autopsies, and long-term, or at least in the near term, we didn't see the volumes necessary to sustain the significant two pathologist office. I will say across the state of Wisconsin, Fond du Lac is a single pathologist office. Brown County has now, are they down to a single? Yeah, I see Jess nodding. So we were in a really good spot to have 2 pathologists as we were starting up, but we look at those revenues, and Jess worked with Sam to put together budget to actual and monitor them, and we just didn't see it in 27 being sustainable without additional levy, which we know we don't have. So Jess, what else did you want to add?
The biggest thing people need to realize is we're a new business. Our office completely dismantled and we had to build from the ground up. And to start at full case volume would have been very, very overwhelming for our team. Our team did the best that they could with the staffing we had, but we definitely identified early on we needed additional support staff. We needed LT autopsy technicians. We need admin support. So the decision was multifocal. We really enjoyed having our second doctor here. She was an amazing person and we definitely wish her well. But we needed to have our office to be sustainable long-term and to allow the staff growth for us to have staff success without staff burnout, no turnover, anything else. So that was pretty much the main reasoning why. We still are onboarding new counties on a regular basis and slowly building that case volume up, but we're doing it in a manageable way so the counties onboarding have a good experience with our office, our staff can support it. We just got our first hospital contract completed and then also supported another hospital with medical autopsies. That was something that was part of our business plan from the beginning, but dealing with legal systems and contract reviews, it takes a long time between both sides to get everything done. So we're slowly building that up. I believe if we continue as we're going and slowly keep increasing our volume, we definitely would be very sustainable for sure with one doctor. And then in the future, if we do get to that point where our case volume is supportive of getting a second one, that would be a time to come back and talk about what that looks like. But we monitor the revenue on a weekly basis and are clearly watching all of our revenue sources in the office. We're also working with our tissue procurement organizations to utilize the tissue procurement suite as much as possible. A lot of their projected volumes that they promised early on have not come to fruition. So they get gentle reminders from me on a regular basis as to why aren't you doing what you said you were going to do, because that's also another revenue source. Number one, we love donation and very support tissue donation, but that is also a revenue source for the office. So I hope I answered your question.
Thanks, Jess. Any questions for Jess or Lance?
So we can go back to the question about benefits. So on the health side, and I want to make sure I understand the question. So if an individual starts on, let's just say, say they started on Monday of this month, they would qualify for health insurance, as I understand it, the first of the next month. Wisconsin retirement system, Sam, you want to if you can take that, they immediately start making contributions.
Correct. So as long as somebody is hired to work at least 24 hours a week or 60% FTE, there is a 1,200-hour requirement in a 12-month rolling period for WRS participation. And then from the employee-employer portion, there's a 5-year vested to make sure that they get fully vested in there. Yes.
And if someone is a 0.75 or 0.8 or 0.9 FTE, their share of benefits in the county share is different compared to if you're a 1.0. So it's not, the split changes, if that also helps. And I can send there's a link on our webpage to lay out our 2026 benefits summary, but.
Do we need a motion for this?
That would be greatly appreciated.
Okay. This would be a motion to refer it to HR Finance
So
and the county board?
to support inclusion of each of the new positions and reclasses into the proposed budget and move it forward to HR Finance and Property.
Would anyone like to make that motion? You don't have to repeat it. Jennifer with a motion and Deb with a second. Any questions or comments from anyone? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you. I got it.
Okay. So we move on to 5B1. Discussion and possible action by public safety to forward to county board for consideration. B1, update to Marathon County Ordinance 5.09, chief deputy appointment.
So this will be Chad.
And I may lean on Brian for a little bit of help with this one. There was a change to law that came last year. It's 2025 Wisconsin Act 196, which really worked to clarify the role of the chief deputy in a sheriff's office. As it stands today, there is a chief deputy, but there is also the ability to appoint an undersheriff. So in essence, the chief deputy is the person that runs the sheriff's office. The undersheriff could be, I could walk out on the street within the first 10 days of taking office, and I could select anyone and say, you're the undersheriff. If they accept it and they're sworn in, if anything were to happen to me, they take over the sheriff's office, not the chief deputy. So what the legislature did, and the Wisconsin Counties Association was very involved in this, Andy Phillips actually wrote the legislation, was they combined the role of the chief deputy and the undersheriff to be one. So that when the chief deputy is selected, they will fulfill the role of the undersheriff. So if anything ever happens to the sheriff, they assume that role until the governor has the ability to appoint a new person to take over the duties of sheriff. In that change, what they also did was they removed the chief deputy from civil service, meaning that the Civil Service Commission, who's a part of the hiring process, is no longer in that role. They'll still fill the role. For us, it's going to be for lieutenant and captain, but the chief deputy is solely the selection of the sheriff in every county now. So what this memo does is it shares those changes, and then Corporation Counsel, Brian Desmond, went through the ordinance and struck the pertinent areas where it no longer applies due to the law change. And then he made some language changes because throughout much of those sections, it says Sheriff's Department, and we changed it to Sheriff's Office to more reflect what we call it here in every sheriff's office in Marathon County, or in the state of Wisconsin, for that matter, the US. So with that, I'll take any questions related to the changes that we're making.
If I can just add one that isn't necessarily required by the act that Chad referenced, that the sheriff referenced on page 92 of your packet, there is a sub 6 is lined out, and I just want to kind of talk about that just for a moment. So that is a previous requirement in our ordinance that said essentially that the chief deputy was not going to run or seek the office of sheriff, whether that's through an appointment, if there was a vacancy, like the sheriff alluded to, if the sheriff were incapacitated, or if as part of the general election cycle. So that is not required by the act to have that removed. The act also doesn't require that you have it in there. So this was a discussion, and Brian and Chad can add to it, but I'll just give you my 2 cents. I do not think this is my opinion, I do not think it is a good idea that you have an artificial bar or prohibition to an individual seeking appointment or election for office for which they may be the best candidate. So one, as an operational, just a practical consideration, I'm a big fan of casting a wide net to get the best candidate. The existing provision that was in the ordinance didn't do that. Second, from a legal standpoint, and while I do hold a law license, I don't practice actively, so I'll let Brian talk on this. I mean, I do think there are some legal questions about the ability to bar an individual from seeking elective office. There's a statute right on point on that municipalities generally should not do that. So I think and not to put words in Chad or in the sheriff's mouth or Brian's, that is a recommendation from staff, but it's not a requirement of the act. But there are practical and I think legal justifications for that. Anything you guys want to add on that point?
Nothing from Brian either? Okay. What about the committee? Any questions? We will need a motion to forward this to the county board to update the Marathon County Ordinance 5.09 Chief Deputy appointment. Who would like to make that? Jason, and who would second it? Deb. All in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, that's passed. 5B2, creation of non-lapsing contingency account for the medical examiner.
All right, I think this will be by committee. Sam, myself, Jess. There is a memo in your packet beginning on page 97. So again, just to set the stage a bit, as Jess and I alluded to, the new operations we have within the medical examiner's office, there in a lot of respects, it operates as a business. With that means we will have good revenue years and we will have years perhaps that are not so good. So as part of your fund balance update, the county board did about a little over a year ago. You created in a number of departments what we termed as non-lapsing contingent accounts. And what that meant was it gave a mechanism for revenues in excess of expenditures in any given year that would otherwise roll into the general fund. It gave the opportunity for departments to have up to a cap, those funds stay in a non-lapsing account. That doesn't mean they get to be spent without county board approval. I want to be very clear on that. There was a lot of discussion about whether or not we wanted to move in that direction as a county to create those. Ultimately, the decision was to create them in a number of different departments. One of the departments that didn't have one at the time was the medical examiner's office. One of the rationales for why I think they are a good thing is because they incentivize the behavior I think, certainly as your administrator, I want to see, but I think you as the county board also want to see. They incentivize departments looking really hard for ways to be good stewards of their money, because at the end of the day, it gets to stay in an account that they get the first crack at it when they want to do something. You just approved one last month with the district attorney's office. Kyle's in the back grinning. You set up a non-lapsing contingent account in the district attorney's office last year. And it was $10,000 for so a much more modest recommendation, or a much more modest account than what we're recommending today for the medical examiner's office. But Kyle and his team managed their budget well. And what that meant was there was a rollover amount that went into that account. He then had a need within his department to do some light renovation to meet some needs with relative to interacting with victims and witnesses of crime, and to ensure sufficient separation between victims and witnesses and general office staff to protect confidentiality. So he brought forward a recommendation to tap into that non-lapsing contingent account to fund that. If he didn't have that non-lapsing contingent account, we would have been talking about planning for that either through the budget or through making a request to contingency, or making a request to my office out of our special project, our limited special project construction fund. So again, the idea of one of the rationales behind creating these is it gives incentive for departments to really work hard to keep those funds, not spend them as they get close to the end of the year and buy a want, but wait until they populate those funds and really can cross a need off the box. So that's the backstory. Here, the recommendation relative to the medical examiner's office is to have a much higher contingent, non-lapsing contingent account, and that's to set it up at $250,000. As we transitioned away from a lay office to a physician-led office, our costs go up. The physician itself, let me, just one illustration of why this is important. If we don't have Dr. Leah Cutting doing autopsies, we have all of the expense and none of the revenue. The other way to say, if we have other vacancy and we don't have enough staff to support Dr. Leah, or we don't have case volumes coming in, we have the immense expense of a physician without the revenue. So revenues can be volatile, as can expense. So our thought is to again incentivize, to further incentivize good behavior, set this account up. The other thing that it does is, because our revenue now within the medical examiner's office is not just Marathon County tax levy, which was historically our case. We had a fair amount of tax levy. We had some external revenue from cremation permits and other things, but we are much more diversified now in our revenue stream. We have a lot more revenues coming in, that if we have a good revenue year, have it go into that non-lapsing account to protect in the event of a year where revenues are more challenged. Or if we have a need for a piece of capital equipment or replacement, some of the capital equipment within the medical examiner's office is quite expensive. So that's the underlying rationale. I know there's likely to be significant discussion and thoughts on whether or not that's the right approach, but because every time we do set up one of these accounts, at least conceivably, what it does is in the year following the audit, it can reduce the amount that would roll over into the CIP. That's an argument kind of against this approach. Again, I think they have worked well, because it gets departments to really look at ways to have funds in revenues in excess of budgeted expenditure, revenues above expenditure, not roll back over into the general fund, because they know they're going to roll into an account that when they have a need, they can come to the county board and say, this is what I want and here's a way I can fund it. So I know that was a lot. Jess, any part you wanted to add? Sam as well?
Thank you. The biggest concern we had is we have a lot of very expensive equipment. So if anything happened with our full body x-ray machine, a new one is $300,000, and fixing can be any cost in between. Just for an example, same with our autopsy equipment, is if we ever had something break down, we can't operate, and then that would force us to have to go to external areas to do the same thing. So this account would really help us be able to function in case of an emergency or a breakdown.
Sam, anything? Just to clarify, again, we can't, Jess and her team, if they did have something come up, they can't just go access that money. You got to go through the budget amendment process to say, just like Kyle did, this is what I want to use the fund for, and the board has to approve it. And it's a supermajority vote to do that.
I would just maybe add on to, even though it will affect the rollover into CIP, it does ultimately affect CIP when that equipment needs to be replaced later on, because you won't have to take it from the CIP fund anymore. You have dedicated funds, so there's some strategy in that as well. Other than that, I think you guys covered it very well.
Any questions from the committee? Go ahead. Okay, Tim first.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. I just said, is that an annual contingency fund, like, will that, or is that just a one-time 250,000?
Great question. The $250,000 cap is a hard cap. So this year they didn't have, the medical examiner's office didn't have any funds roll over. If they had $50,000 revenue above expense next year, 50,000 would go in. And if, say, they did that for 5 years, they'd hit that 250. They can't put any more in. So it's essentially a bucket that they can fill up over time, but it can't go over the 250. Does that answer the question?
Well, kind of like, so if it's on, so this ain't going on the levy at all then, is what you're saying?
It's a non-lapsing account that does not get filled directly with levy, but what it would get filled with is when we get to the end of the year, if there are revenues within a budget that are above what the expenses are, that gap would get put into the non-lapsing contingent account to a max of $250,000.
Yeah,
But again, to tap into that, to use it, it needs to come back to the county board.
yeah, thank you.
Jason, you have something? Okay. Any more questions? So we need to move.
Oh, I know John has some questions.
The administrator and I had a discussion earlier. I have some concerns, which he outlined. I understand and support the concept here, but I again, going back to the initial rolling stock discussion, if you keep taking things out of the end of the year balances, we impact our capital improvement funding mechanism. I think there's merit to this, but I think I want to be cautious that if a $750,000 piece of equipment breaks down, $250,000 isn't going to cover it. They're going to have to come in. I think there's merit in looking at it, but I think there's also merit in the county board on a periodic basis reviewing all of those contingency funds to look at what our experience has been, how they've been utilized, to make sure that they're not workarounds around the budget process. So I would intend to support this, but I would encourage the board members to be diligent and review this on a periodic basis for compliance with the intent of why it was created.
Thanks, John. Ann?
Thanks again, Madam Chair. Thanks again, Madam Chair. I guess I just want to clarify where the 250,000 value came from, because is that right-sized, or is that what you mean, Chair Robinson, that you would say we should come back and revisit to make sure these are right-sized?
Where the dollar amount came from, it was, we sat down and talked, and to Jess's point, her stuff is expensive. It's not like, we're gonna look back again to Kyle. His capital improvement needs are pretty minimal on a recurring basis. Jess's are not. When something breaks in or isn't working in the medical examiner's office, our thought was a much higher amount would be necessary. But again, in my conversation with Committee Chair Robinson, this is a high one. This is higher than any of the other general fund departments, apart from, I think, the sheriff's office. If you had the jail and the sheriff's office together, it might be higher. But I fully support the idea of taking frequent looks at this to see, is this an appropriate amount? I also think it's incumbent upon, certainly I will look at these as the requests come in to use them. They are set up for, generally speaking, capital. That's what they are, I think, intended for, particularly for capital things that wouldn't rank very high in the very competitive capital improvement planning process that we have. Bridges, roads, roofs, boilers they're expensive, and they're going to rank well through our process. Things like ortho imagery updates that conservation planning and zoning want, they just don't. But this gives a mechanism for those other departments for things that maybe aren't going to ever rate that high to endure a little bit of pain. Because the way you probably are going to fill this, if you're, again, to pick on Kyle, our personnel budgets in our departments are the places where that's the lion's share of our expense generally. We are a service-driven organization and people deliver services. So when there's a vacancy, maybe a department holds that open a little bit longer than they would otherwise like to because they know this is an opportunity for me to hold it open a little bit, endure some pain, because then I can go to the county board because I have this thing that I think we need and I can fund it through this mechanism. But the short answer to your question, Supervisor Lemmer, we came up with that number after a little bit of discussion, but I fully support the idea that perhaps on an annual basis, we look at those to see what the utilization has been and what projects they are brought forward to tap into those funds.
Lance, move it up to the financial review.
Down?
Yeah, sorry.
Sure.
So, Ann, the proposed policy amendment does not increase the county's budgeted expenditures or tax levy. Rather, it authorizes the retention of year-end medical examiner operating surpluses. Does that make more sense?
No, I understand that. I just don't want to hamstring us later.
No.
And so just to make sure, I don't know where the 250,000 came from. It was a pretty high amount compared to the other contingency funds on the list. So I just was posing that question is, where did it come from? And maybe would a compromise be to take it down to 150? But again, I would be pulling that out of my ear too. So don't listen to me necessarily.
Yeah, that's what we did. I mean, we just talked, and I mean, the Phobos is the full body x-ray machine is the Phobos machine. That was the thing that in our mind, hey, if that ever breaks, or if we need to do some capital equipment work, it's not great to have to come back to either contingency or the general fund. It would be nice to have a place to look to first.
Jason?
Thank you. With hearing this now, let's say they would need a new roof and they have the money in that fund, or an air conditioner goes down, or a furnace. Is that going to come out of their fund, or is that going to come out of CIP rollover?
I should be asking you that question, because I don't make it would be a source of funding for discussion. But I don't think that's a reasonable place to always look, because the cost of a new roof is going to exceed the cost of or the amount that's in these funds. But it could be a source, absolutely. It might be a blended funding stream. You have done that with, another place that kind of inspired this conversation, and this was brought up by Committee Chair Robinson today, was the library. The library has essentially a non-lapsing reserve account. Once you give money to the library, it is the library's to do with what they please. So a little bit different, but when the library roof needed to be replaced, the county put funds into that, as well as requesting that the library utilize some of its reserve funds to do that project. So the short answer to your question, yes, the board could say, hey, we have this expense with respect to the building. We also see that the medical examiner's non-lapsing contingent account has $250,000 in it. We want to pull $50,000 out of that to use for funding, and we want to use $150,000 of contingency. So short answer, yes, you absolutely could do that.
Any more questions? Okay, we'll need a motion to forward to the county board for its consideration, the creation of a non-lapsing contingency account for the medical examiner. Okay, Jen with the motion, second. Second with Jason. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Deb, I've had to leave. About 2:55. Okay, moving on to number 6, educational presentations and committee discussion. 6A, flock safety and the use of ALPR technology by the sheriff's office. Is this Chad's? Nope, okay.
This is going to be
Captain
Captain
Stefanik.
Stefanik is coming
Okay.
up. And he's got he'll talk through, this was asked to be put on the agenda, and he has put together some nice PowerPoint slides, which will circulate to everybody on the committee and get in the packet moving forward. But with that, I'll turn it over to Captain Stefanik. Here, I'll get out of here.
Got a nice screen. She didn't turn anything.
Good, okay. Good afternoon. I'm Jeff Stefanik. I'm the captain of the investigations division at the sheriff's office. Thank you for committee for having us discuss ALPR technology. It's technology we've been using since 2023, and we found a lot of success with it. It's an excellent tool for improving public safety in Marathon County, but we understand there's questions and recent news articles about it. We want the opportunity to educate this committee as our partners in public safety in Marathon County. So, brief overview, we're going to discuss what is ALPR. We're going to talk specifically about the vendor we use, Flock Safety Systems, what it is, what its capabilities are, and also what it isn't. We're going to talk about data access and retention, policies and regulations that govern our use of the system, specifically how the sheriff's office uses Flock in Marathon County, and the public safety benefits we envision and those that we have experienced of ALPR. So ALPR stands for Automated License Plate Readers. They are stationary or mobile high definition cameras. The cameras capture images or video of vehicles, and they have capability to illuminate the vehicles at night with infrared light to see plates at nighttime. They have special software capabilities that locates plates within the images and recognizes characters, allowing them to be license plate readers. They are common in public and private sector use. They've been around since the 1970s. However, they are becoming more prevalent in the last 10 years because of advances in technology that make them cheaper and more compact. We see them, when I think about it personally, when we visit our neighbors to the south in Illinois and you drive through and cross the border, you see the Illinois tollway system uses LPR technology. They have the big steel structures you drive underneath, and you see the cameras reading your rear license plate as you pass through so that you can be charged for tolls to travel in Illinois. Same technology. Bringing it closer to home in the private sector, again, personally, I'm a member, subscriber of Tommy Car Wash. When you pull up to the gate to get your car washed, and at that time you're parking in front of a camera that reads your rear license plate, it checks it against their system to see if you have an active subscription, and it opens the gate for you and you can get your car washed. That's LPR technology. There are products on the market now, specifically the ones we use, that hone down that technology and adapt it to law enforcement uses, and that's what we're going to talk about. So Flock Safety System is the vendor that we use for LPR technology with the Marathon County Sheriff's Office. They market and are used exclusively by law enforcement agencies. The way they work is they capture images of the rear of a passing vehicle in a public place. That image is analyzed by the software in the camera, and it is cataloged with a plate number, the date and time the image was captured, the location, and it also has the ability to identify vehicle characteristics such as body style, if it's a van, a truck, a sedan, or SUV, et cetera, make of the vehicle, color of the vehicle, and add-ons such as a topper on a pickup truck, or a bike rack on the back of a car, or a toolbox in the bed of a truck, or maybe bumper stickers. Those images are stored with that analyzed data for up to 30 days and is searchable for law enforcement purposes based on the parameters of those details. The cameras do not include facial recognition technology or log the identities, race, or gender of the vehicle occupants. They do not provide a live feed or live vehicle tracking. They do not detect speed or other traffic infractions. Any system that we use in law enforcement that collects, stores, or transmits data is subject to regulation by a system we refer to as CJIS. It's the Criminal Justice Information Services managed by the federal government. We have to be compliant in all of our systems to follow CJIS regulations, and part of our contract with FLOC is that they are CJIS compliant. We know that they are. All data that they collect is encrypted during storage and transmission and is only viewable by authorized users. Those users must use multi-factor authentication to log in, and every login and action completed by those users is kept in an audit log that is kept indefinitely. I noted that all the images and information gathered by the cameras is purged after 30 days. That is not true with the audit trail. That is kept forever. Data collected by the camera system is owned by the agency who contracts with FLOC, so that would be us, is not owned by FLOC, and no data is sold to third parties. No personal information about vehicle owners or drivers is developed or maintained in the FLOC system. On top of what CJIS requires and the safeguards built into FLOC, Marathon County Sheriff's Office has our own personnel policy that is in your packets in pages 106 through 108. To summarize some of the main points of that personnel policy: only authorized users engaging in legitimate law enforcement practices or necessary administrative duties may access the FLOC system. Use of FLOC systems for personal reasons or other unauthorized purposes is prohibited. Unauthorized access or use of the FLOC system is grounds for discipline. And a FLOC search result may never stand alone as probable cause for enforcement action. And I'll give you an example of that point there. A FLOC hit may tell us that there is a stolen vehicle in Marathon County. An officer who sees that result in a search or a hot list hit from FLOC is not allowed to take that information alone and stop that vehicle and make an arrest or any other enforcement action based on that hit alone. They must verify what the tool has told them with their own eyes and consider the totality of the circumstances and verify independently that that vehicle is still considered stolen. We use a time system through our dispatch center that deputy or officer can check to make sure that that is considered a stolen vehicle. If anything doesn't match up with what they see or what they verify independently, they cannot just use that FLOC search to take enforcement action. Marathon County Sheriff's Office currently operates 10 stationary FLOC cameras. We don't have any mobile or vehicle-mounted FLOC cameras. They don't really make sense for an agency like ours. Those are very useful in very urban areas where there's a lot of on-the-street parking and a lot of dense traffic. For us to have mobile cameras in Marathon County where traffic is spread out and there's a lot of rural highway, doesn't make sense for us. But the 10 stationary cameras do serve a good purpose for us. The cost of those for all 10 is $26,500 per year. And that cost has been completely grant funded since inception in 2023. Cameras are placed in public locations on roadway right-of-ways. Authorized users from our agency can query the cataloged photos for legitimate law enforcement purposes, which include the investigation of crimes, to identify suspects, to search for missing and endangered persons, to search for fugitives or wanted persons, and to search for stolen vehicles. We do participate in sharing with other agencies so that we can locate suspects, victims, and property beyond the borders of Marathon County, as well as be alerted if dangerous or endangered persons come into Marathon County. So now that we know the rules around it and what our system looks like in Marathon County, this screen shows what a search looks like. When a user logs into the system, they must first enter their investigative purpose. This becomes part of the audit log that verifies that they are using it for a legitimate purpose. Next, they enter the plate or the vehicle description they are seeking. I say vehicle description because we don't always need to know a plate we're searching for. An example would be, let's say that a burglary happens in Marathon County at 3 o'clock tomorrow morning. And an eyewitness can tell the responding deputy that they saw a white Chevy Impala leave that area. A user can log in and search for those vehicles' characteristics, a white Chevy Impala without knowing a license plate number in that area, in that time frame, and come up with hit results. We've had a lot of success in Marathon County with those types of searches because we are spread out. If you narrow your search parameters, you're pretty likely to find a vehicle that's associated with your case. And we'll talk more about those search parameters in a little bit. You enter the cameras to be searched and the timeline. It is advantageous to the investigator to narrow those as much as possible. If we use the example of that same Chevy Impala, if we enter the maximum timeline of 30 days and we check the box to query every camera we have access to across the country, the investigator is going to get a search result yielding thousands and thousands of vehicle hits, and it wouldn't be possible to work your way through that investigation with all of those hits. But if we narrow the time frame to the last 2 hours, because that's when the burglary was reported, and we enter, we search only cameras that a Chevy Impala could travel to within a 2-hour time frame, we're much more likely to be able to get a valuable search result and further our investigation. Once you hit enter and the search comes across, the user will get a list of thumbnails and results showing vehicles that match that search criteria. If you click on one of them, it gives you this investigative summary, and it provides a photo of the vehicle, a zoomed in photo of the license plate, the date, time, and location the image was captured, and this may lead you to a suspect. So if this was the suspect vehicle in the case I previously described, if we had been looking for a black Dodge Durango, we now have a license plate and we can continue our investigation and identify a suspect. Another reason I provided the zoomed out photo of what the vehicle image looks like, I previously said it does not include facial recognition technology or any means for including the demographics of the driver or owner of the vehicle. You can see from that photo, looking at the back of the vehicle, that is a very typical photo that all of the return results look like, and it's impossible to tell who's driving that vehicle. So we don't gain driver information from flock cameras. In addition to the point-in-time searches, users can create hot lists of plates that will alert users when a specific plate is detected. Examples of when we would use these would be with a stolen vehicle, a missing or endangered person who is known to be in a specific vehicle, or wanted persons who are believed to be driving specific vehicles. We can create a hot list where we enter that plate and the system will alert that user anytime that plate is read on one of our flock cameras. Our agency has been extremely successful in locating stolen vehicles in this manner. Again, a hot list alert must always be verified by other means before enforcement action is taken. As members of the Public Safety Committee and our partners in creating a safer county, as you hear me describe these, I'm sure you're imagining in your head all the valuable ways we could use this in investigations. And we did the same when the grants became available to acquire this equipment. And our expectations have been exceeded. We have several success stories and examples of the ways these tools have solved investigations that would not have otherwise been solved, or made investigations more efficient so that we could bring a resolution to a case faster than we otherwise would have. Just a few examples of some of those. We had a young lady 2 years ago, a juvenile in a mental health crisis, who cut her wrist with a razor blade and swallowed a bottle of pills and then went for a drive without telling her family where she was going. The family called 911, and immediately our deputies searched the flock system and were able to identify which area of the county she had traveled to. Our deputies were able to focus their search and locate her and provide emergency services. We consider that a life saved that probably wouldn't have been or wouldn't have gotten help as quickly if we didn't have the flock system. In another case, we had a burglary come in out of our county. Much like the example I provided before, the deputy completed a flock search, located a suspect vehicle based on the description alone, and we were able to apprehend the suspect within about 6 hours. Their car was located with numerous burglary tools and had evidence inside the vehicle from multiple burglaries, and the suspect had multiple warrants. It was a person who was completing a string of burglaries, and the fact that they were stopped quickly after that flock hit prevented future crimes from happening in our county. I have on the list here that this is considered a force multiplier for us. We're able to do more with less. We have the largest county in the state geographically, as you know. Being able to query static cameras that help our investigations in this manner really help our deputies respond quicker and complete investigations more efficiently and devote time to the next investigation that comes along. From an officer safety perspective, when we have hot lists that have stolen vehicles or wanted suspects on them, and we are alerted ahead of time that they enter Marathon County, we can plan a tactical response to apprehending that person rather than be surprised by stopping that person on a traffic stop or encountering them when they are in the act of committing their next crime. Those better tactics aid with officer safety. Another way that officer safety is helped is we have the ability to, excuse me, I lost my spot here. There we go. When we are in a vehicle pursuit, an officer must consider numerous criteria to make sure that we should continue that pursuit while we weigh the safety of the citizens and the officers involved. If the one of those criteria is whether or not we know the identity of the suspect. Flock has given us the opportunity to have a different means of identifying the suspect so that if, while we're doing that balancing act, it becomes apparent that it is too risky to continue a pursuit because the danger to the public is too great or the danger of the officers is too great, and we know that Flock can identify the suspect, we can then terminate a pursuit and keep our officers safer. The list goes on and on of examples of ways that we have had successes. If you stop any of our deputies in the hallway and ask them for their most memorable example of successful ways they have used Flock to solve a case, they all have one. Several of them have many, and we've only had this for 3 years. With that, I welcome any questions from the committee.
Go ahead, Jason.
I've had people talk to me about flock cameras a little bit, so I did a little bit of looking into it. And the concerns that are raised about them, like, for example, 50 law enforcement officers were using them for personal reasons. One in Milwaukee was stalking a woman and used it 124 times to check in on her. And then there was a incident, I think it was on 94, where a flock reader picked up a car and said that it was somebody that was wanted for homicide, and a woman was pulled over with guns drawn, and turns out she wasn't the person of interest. But and I think people are seeing that and they're getting scared. You know, they see this and they don't know. But do the systems work in coordination with other counties?
Sure. I'll address those first 2 items first. And obviously, we share those concerns. We never want bad apples working in law enforcement because even outside of Flock, any system we use or any of the equipment that we give to our people has a risk of being used for corruptive purposes, and we don't want that. So describing the policies and laws that are in place and our audit system, the nice thing about Flock and why we use them is they have built-in audit reports where every time I log in the system, I can click on that tab and it shows me anything that would be flagged in the system that would be considered possible for an inappropriate use. As an example, we have a lot of the searches we use Flock for are for drug investigations, and a lot of these investigations that our drug task force does go on for months and months. So we'll see in the system where the same investigator has queried the same plate a dozen or 24 times, and we can look at what case that investigator is working and say, okay, that makes sense. They've been working this case for 9 months, and they've checked this vehicle every couple of weeks. That makes sense to us. I had one recently where I clicked in there and there was over 200 searches by one deputy at one plate, and that was really an outlier. I approached that deputy to hear the rest of the story, and it turned out that plate that was being searched belonged to a vehicle that a suspect has used in Marathon, Clark, and Taylor counties several times in the past 6 months for various crimes. The person known to be driving it has multiple felony warrants, and all 3 of those counties have been involved in high-speed pursuits with that vehicle, and the suspect got away in each of those. And this particular deputy was involved in one of those pursuits in which the suspect got away. And every day since then, when he starts his shift, first thing in the morning he does is queries that plate to see if it happens to be in Marathon County and he can find and arrest that person. I commended him for his perseverance and his diligence in that. And for me, I was happy to have the example of why he was searching it that many times, but also I was happy to see that example in the system where it alerted me and the audit system worked. It was an outlier, the system caught it, and I was able to address it. Perfectly innocent example, but nice to know. To the last part of your question, we do share with other counties. We really want to know when we're investigating a case, if somebody crosses the borders into a neighboring county or neighboring state where we can still have a possibility of solving that case because they're picked up on a Flock camera somewhere. And likewise, if somebody dangerous from another county comes into ours and we can help arrest that person or keep our citizens safe, we want to know that as well. Another layer to that is in-house in our building, we operate a federal narcotics task force. We have personnel in there from 11 different agencies, including federal, state, and local partners. Our drug enforcement investigations benefit Marathon County first and foremost, but they usually have a regional impact. A lot of times the drugs coming in our community are either coming up from Chicago or across from the Twin Cities, and commonly come from Mexico, and they traverse the United States before we get here. And our drug task force works with task forces in other regions and across the country, and we like having that reach in those cases.
Okay, thank you.
Any more questions? Oh, go ahead, Joe.
Thank you. It seems to me you're creating with a camera, whether it's on your body, an officer's body, or on a telephone pole or whatever, there's a public record generated. Is the public allowed to request those public records that are being created?
Within reason, yes. As with any public records request, we have to do a balancing test as to their request. If it's specific to their own plate and
Yeah, it can't be anybody else's plate because I don't think that the law allows for you to request someone else's plate.
Sure. You predicted what I was
So
going to
you
say.
really would be not being allowed to request public records. So that's just going to be inherently something that the public's going to be shut out from knowing. They can't know what's going on.
Well, it
Even though they're
depends.
the subject of a public record, they can't request a public record. Because the sniff test, the balancing test would roll in the favor of the owner of the camera.
In certain cases, but there are plenty of public records requests we have already received regarding our ALPR cameras that we have honored because they're not after something that can be used to track another individual.
And just to piggyback on what Jason's saying, I too have a lot of constituency and they're concerned about it. And because I represent their concern here and on the board, I'm just reflecting that right now.
Sure.
That's all. Thank you.
Go ahead, Jim.
I got a little bit of comments on, I kind of look at things through the long-term effects of the actions we take as representatives here to serve the people. There's been a big uprising lately against the flock cameras and plate readers across the nation for very good reason. In a number of cities, including here in Madison, the flock cameras and plate readers are being removed. They see the cons far outweigh the pros. And I'll piggyback on what Jason had, because I got this article here. In a number of cases, innocent people have been wrongfully arrested. Possibly the closest one here was in Milwaukee and Brookfield, Wisconsin. This Amber Newell was pulled over and was stopped at gunpoint after her vehicle was flagged by a flock camera and a plate reader. She was flagged in connection with the homicide, but she was just an innocent bystander. Her vehicle was towed and then she was released. Three days later, the Brookfield officers surrounded her vehicle on I-94 and taken at gunpoint. She and her passengers were ordered out of her vehicle and placed in handcuffs. This could have gone very badly, and innocent lives could have been taken. This is just one of many cases that wrongful arrests have occurred with the use of flock cameras. Lastly, and most importantly of these cameras, I believe this is an attack on our unalienable rights, our rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, which are protected by our Constitution, and which many veterans have fought, bled, and died to preserve. Looking at our Constitution, Amendment 4 does address this issue. As I look at America today, our liberties and freedoms are being taken from us more and more every day. I look at communist China. You look at the correlations, having full surveillance of the people and how they're treated there. This is much deeper than one can imagine. And another thing too, last fall, the Congress passed a bill where they put shutdown switches in every vehicle manufactured. if you look at how the future and how you want to leave your country for your children. I'll leave with this quote from one of our great founding forefathers, Thomas Jefferson. I prefer dangerous liberty over peaceful slavery. And I do agree with this man. Thank you.
Any more questions from Ann?
Thank you, and thank you, Captain, for this presentation. I think I have too been reached out by people, and certainly is a lightning rod topic. But I think some of the questions will be answered, some of their questions. There are a couple others, so if you don't mind entertaining me a little bit. I was fortunate enough to, well, when I exercise, I oftentimes watch Wausau City Council meetings, and I happened to see Captain,
Graham.
thank you, Captain Graham's presentation. And he said Wausau operates 20 cameras. You said you operate 10. Are those different than the Wausau cameras, or are they the same? Are some of them the same?
They're the same camera system, yes.
But I mean, are they co-located? So some.
Oh, I see. I'm sorry, I misunderstood. No, they're not co-located. They have their 20, we have our 10 that are in separate locations from theirs.
And then you may not know this, but I think we have, I don't know, I counted about 12 other police units and a state patrol. Do you know, do they also have their own cameras?
State Patrol?
And Everest Metro, Rothschild, Cronenwetter, Mosinee, et cetera. There are like 12 other police units in Marathon County. I'm just trying to get
yeah.
how big, how many flock cameras are in Marathon County? Because when I watched Captain Graham, it looked like, oh, there's only 20, but now you have 10, and then I can imagine there's probably, Mosinee probably has some, Marathon may, Athens may. I mean, maybe you don't know that. I'm just trying to wonder, is there a place to see a
I believe
map?
several of those small agencies do not have any. I don't know if State Patrol has any. I don't think they have any in Marathon County. I'll ask my peers in the room to speak up if they know better. Okay, I'm seeing shaking heads, no. I think we are the only agencies between us and Wausau PD that have them right now in Marathon County.
Okay.
And I would encourage you to ask them, just because I don't want to speak for them.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I guess that's part of the problem with the, this is a trust issue.
Sure.
And it's really hard to get the information if we have to go to 12 different sources. It would be great to have one source. And I'm not a investigative journalist yet, no. But, I'm just asking on behalf of some of my people. And so I just want to, again, I don't mean to compare you to Wausau, but because I saw that presentation, Wausau has a dashboard that really does kind of talk to their level of transparency. It clearly delineates what's in scope and what's out of scope. When I looked at the plan on pages 106, 107, and 108, it talks about what's in scope, but it really doesn't delineate what's out of scope. And I think that would be helpful. So for example, Wausau doesn't work with immigration issues. They don't use Flock to track people that might be pregnant, for instance. And I don't see what's out of scope. And I think it would go a long way if there was some way for Marathon County to get a dashboard similar to what Wausau has, which could show some of the ROI on this. What gains you've had, what how many cars you've retrieved, if most of it's from stolen vehicles, et cetera. So, that would be a suggestion that I would highly recommend, going forward. Now, you said you started this contract grant-funded in 2023. How long does that contract go, first of all? And then second, is this going to continue to be grant-funded if the contract is up? And then third, did this and will this come through county board for our approval?
Sure. The initial 5 cameras that we acquired in 2023 were purchased under a 4-year contract. I think that was July of 2023, so that one would expire in July of 2027. And 3 additional cameras were added in 2025, again under a 4-year contract. So that grant would expire in 2029.
Wait, you just said that's 8?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, that's 8. There are two more that are paid for by Real Mountain. So not county paid for.
And then, did they come through, like our normal grant procurement process? Or is this an operational thing that isn't usually going to go through the county board, this grant?
I'll let the sheriff answer that one.
I think that these grants, Lance and I tried to go back and look and find the minutes, but I believe they came through committee 23 and 23 or whatever, because we remember having the conversation when the grants came through, but I can't find it. So I believe they came to committee way back then. I can't recall.
Yeah, sorry, didn't mean to cut you off,
No.
Chad. I do recall the committee getting a presentation on the use of these cameras when that began. With respect to, would the contract ever come before this committee for review? Mr. Desmond is probably typing me a message right now. The sheriff, as I think we've said in this committee before, under statutes and the state of Wisconsin Constitution, they have authority beyond what you would typically associate with a department head or even myself. At the end of the day, I work for the county board. If I'm doing a thing you don't want me to do, you can tell me not to, and I will listen, or I fully expect that you would take whatever action you think is appropriate. The sheriff is certainly different. They are elected. They get to enter into certain agreements that fall within what are referred to as their immemorial duties within the statutes without significant intervention or undue intervention from the Board of Supervisors, because you are the legislative body, the sheriff is the executive body. So I hesitate to render a legal opinion that's outside of my job, but I would not foresee that a contract for this sort of law enforcement service that relates to how the sheriff operates and performs the law enforcement and investigative work of the sheriff's office to come before the committee or the full board. Ryan, keep me honest on that.
I think you pretty much got it correct.
Well, it seems squishy just because other grants do come forward, and I'm not saying, that it's appropriate or not. I guess what I'm just wondering is, if we were to get a dashboard, if there are overtime, if there are impacts, it would just be nice to know how this affects the budget. Again, I'm not trying to micromanage. I'm just trying to understand, how this all works. So
Understood.
Again, thank you for the presentation.
Sure, and I can augment what they said a little bit. I'm familiar with the type of grant that was used. Through Wisconsin DOJ, and they do follow the usual process that requires signatures from the county board chair as well as us. So it's similar process if they were to be used again. That being said, that type of grant usually cannot be used to, it needs to be used to expand or create a new tool.
I have one more. According to the, this is, I think I need my glasses off. Yep. 2 under 423.5 sub E, it says the sheriff command may conduct audits. Do you? And if you do, how frequently, you kind of alluded to that you can, but the word may in there, again, seems a little squishy, and my people are asking for accountability.
Yeah.
Can that be changed to shall? Not that, again, I'm trying to micromanage, but improving transparency and accountability. Just wondering if you're open to that.
Oh, I get it, I understand, and I appreciate the question. And it's something we would have to discuss internally. Certainly it can. Whether it will, we would have to discuss in the future. And as to whether or not the audits are conducted, yes. As I said, the way Block makes it easy, myself as one of the administrators in our agency, every time I log in, I have the audit tab available to me, and I click on it. So it's actually done quite frequently. And I'm sorry, I'll address the public-facing dashboard that you're referring to. That's a very new feature in the Flock system. I commend Captain Graham and Wausau PD for getting that public-facing so quickly. It's a tool that we are working our way through, and I expect we'll be using that in the future. Oh, sure. The administrator is asking how often those audits happen. I would say I'm in the system at least twice a month, but they're not at a set date and time. You know, we will audit the first of every month or something like that.
Any more questions from the committee? Thank you so much, Captain Scafani. It was very informational. Appreciate it. 6B, Justice Alternatives Program Data Update. Is that you, Laura? We have Laura Yeri here.
Yes, Laura, and I think Michael's coming up. So this was a request for additional information. Again, it's really largely consistent with the work you do relative to oversight for the budget, but questions about what our Justice Alternatives Program performs. But I'll have Michael and Laura kind of go through this. Laura will start with a overview of what the programs are, but then Michael can walk you through the dashboard that is in the packet.
I'm going to turn the meeting over to Vice Chair Arstad. I have to take a personal break. I will be back shortly.
Hello. I just will make a really quick overview. If anybody has additional questions about treatment court, I encourage you to reach out to me.
I don't believe there's anyone online. Yeah, I don't believe anyone's online from. Yeah. So we'll just take a brief recess, 5 minutes, and then we'll come back.